Hello and welcome. This is your weekly fix. I'm Smitha Nair. Will same sex marriages be legally recognized? Will gay and lesbian couples be allowed to adopt? In less than a week from today, you will be able to watch and listen in to live streamed proceedings in the Supreme Court in one of the most consequential cases in recent times on the right to equality. The petitioner's cases are strengthened by two key judgments of the last decade: the recognition of the right to privacy as a fundamental right in 2017, and the landmark ruling decriminalizing homosexuality in the year that followed. What has the government's position been? Well, predictable that these unions are not compatible with the Indian concept of family, that it would create havoc with the delicate balance of personal laws, etc., which are countered by the advocates of same sex marriage who say that societal attitudes or conventions cannot be limiting factors or reasonable restrictions on the exercise of fundamental rights. Today, though, we aren't contending with the legal aspects of the debate. The Indian Psychiatric Society, an umbrella body of over 7,000 psychiatrists in India, extended its support for same sex marriage, equal rights, and adoption. In its statement, the society said LGBTQIA spectrum individuals should be treated like all citizens of the country. Preventing any civil rights may lead to mental health issues. It's important to note here that in 2018 as well, the position statement issued by the IPS that homosexuality is not an illness played an instrumental role in the Supreme Court decriminalizing homosexuality. In another significant development, the Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights has moved the Supreme Court, saying the centre and state governments should take steps to create public awareness that same-sex family units are, quote, normal. We're joined today by Dr. Alka Subramanyam, psychiatrist at the BYL Nair Hospital in Mumbai and author of the position statement published by the society. Thank you, Dr. Subramanyam, for making the time for speaking to us here at Scroll.
Happy to be here, Smitha.
Right. Dr. Subramanyam, at one point during the hearing in the Supreme Court, and I'm saying this also for the benefit of our viewers, the Solicitor General, articulating the government's opposition to same-sex marriage, questioned, and I quote, "What would be the psychology of a child who has seen either two men or only two women as parents? What would be the psychology of a child who was not reared by a father and a mother?" In reply to which, Justice Chandrachud, the Chief Justice of India, said, "But, Mr. Solicitor, the adopted child of a lesbian couple or a gay couple do not necessarily have to be lesbian or gay." I have two questions, Dr. Subramanyam, that follow from this. One, was the statement of the Solicitor General implying adverse psychological impact on children adopted by gay or lesbian couples something that prompted your organization, to publish that position statement? And B, is this sort of apprehension you see widely expressed by those who are opposed to allowing same-sex couples to adopt, that same-sex couples, their children will also become gay or lesbian? Is that something that you often hear?
This is one of the main things that made our task force. So we have different committees who work in different areas. And one of the things that alerted the task force who works in this, or has been, and who had been instrumental in the 2018 statement, that was Dr. Kirsi Chawda and Dr. Amritpat Joshi, who contacted us, was that one is same-sex marriages and the permission to have them, and second is the aspect of adoption and the impact it would have on the child. So what we did is that we actually tried to research in countries where same-sex marriages and adoption is permitted, is allowed, to see if there were really adverse effects and whether this would have any impact on the child. And surprisingly, we could not really find to state the same. Now, as far as our societal fabric is concerned, you see, acceptance of same-sex marriages or acceptance of LGBTQ in general is something which is going to come slowly seeping in. India is so diverse. You cannot say urban India is India. India is actually in its grassroots and its rural, centers. And having said that, the youth of today across the board are much more aware that LGBTQ is something which is normal. It is not abnormal, which is why we thought that just having issued a statement that they are not criminals. This is not homosexuality or being on the spectrum is not something that is a criminal behavior or something that needs conversion. This is a variation of normal humanity. To extend that further, it is necessary to clarify also that these individuals are human beings like everyone else. They also have desires. Many of them want families, many of them want to have children. The diktat normally is that you would expect every family to have a mother figure and a father figure, and you think that that is what sort of propels normal development in a child. Actually, when you see single parent families, when you see divorced families, when you see other cases where children have been taken up for foster care, what is imperative is having a continuous caregiver who is committed to the child. And I don't think that has anything to do with gender. Once a child can identify that this individual cares for me, the child automatically develops in a way which is the normal trajectory for the child. Don't you have so many families where you have only the mother and a grandmother? See, these are two caregivers. It's just that their relationship is not bound by a same sex marriage. So please see a child from a child's perspective. The child is looking at my caregiver. It's a different thing that we label it as mama, papa, just like we label so many other things in life. So for the child, caregiving is the most important thing, which is what the philosophy we really want others to understand.
Right. Um, may I ask you, Dr. Subramanyam, to take us through these? I believe there were 23 empirical studies that were conducted across countries of children raised by gay fathers and lesbian mothers that formed the basis of this position paper, as you told us in the first answer. Could you tell us what exactly these studies looked at? Like, what is it? Emotional functioning, cognitive functioning, and sort of, if you could tell us what were the conclusions drawn?
So I must also tell you that the sample sizes are not too big. See, even in terms of the mental health aspects of LGBTQ, we don't have robust data because it's been such a marginalized community that they are honestly a little shy, right? And we don't have head on data with heterosexual individuals too. Similarly, with the studies that were conducted were largely in the Scandinavian countries, which have been very progressive, and USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So these studies, what they showed is that in terms of commitment and in terms of continuity of care, actually, once an LGBTQ couple decides to take over or adopt a child, their concern and their involvement with the child is equal, if not more. Some of the studies showed that they're actually better parents in terms of parenting. But like I said, those numbers are small, so let's not say they're better. Let's at least say that there is nothing to show that they are worse parents. There is nothing to show that these children had worse outcomes in terms of their psychiatric morbidity. There's nothing to show that these children did not develop normally. Now, I'm going to flip that and tell you the other way. People who are on the spectrum, LGBTQ, where do they come from? Do all of them come from homosexual families? No, no. They come from heterosexual families. So, where is the question of LGBTQ promoting LGBTQ and therefore it becomes this is biological, this is hardwired. There's nobody, very few, I would say, of people on the spectrum who haven't gone through trauma, even self acceptance. Just a couple of days ago, I had this young boy who just realized his gender identity was female, actually. And he's so traumatized. And he was like, I'm just going to be whatever I am because I know society will never accept, my parents will never accept, so on and so forth. And the first step that we do in their hand holding is let's accept ourselves, then we will talk about going further. You see, why would anyone choose to be like this? Why would anyone choose to be so apparently different that you are shunned in a society which treats you differently? Therefore, now where awareness has come about and advocacy has come, the acceptance is so important and imperative for us to move towards an inclusive society, which includes the children.
I sort of want to dwell a bit on what you spoke about this sort of, our society and our culture being sort of imbued with this construct that children need these complementary but distinct roles of that mothers and fathers play, and this is sort of an ideal unit, a mother-father unit. Given the studies that you have done, even if they are limited in number, would it be correct to say that a sustained, campaign to talk about this in various fora would perhaps help in sort of chipping away at this strongly held beliefs that that a family unit needs to be a father and a mother, and these sort of complementary but distinct roles exist and can only be played by a biological woman and a biological man?
Certainly. So, education and advocacy go hand in hand. And we have to constantly endeavor to see that the populace at large understands this. Few ways of doing it are changing curricula. If you look in school books today, textbooks, most of them have a chapter on someone who has a physical impairment or visual impairment or learning disability or autism, or they talk about adoption. So there's a distinct change in what we are telling the children is normal. So similarly, you know, take something as simple as garbage disposal, which used to be so pathetic in our country till a few years ago, till we decided that we want to go ahead and Swachh Bharat was born and so on and so forth. So you have small villages who are the cleanest village in India. So this is ingraining it at a grassroots level. What we need to change. One is behavior and second is understanding. So understanding changes when you have advocacy across the board, across the ages. If I have a 10-second ad on mainstream media during IPL saying homosexuality is not a crime, gay marriages are not abnormal. If I hear it 100 times, don't you think I'm going to eventually think that, okay, I need to think about this? At least let me read up about it. At least let me find it. There will always be outliers. There are always people who completely don't agree with things. But when we look at it from a scientific perspective, and which is what the Indian Psychiatric Society has tried to really bring into this in perspective, yes, humanity, yes, a social need, all that is there. But in terms of science, do you have anything to prove that this is adverse? No. Today we do not, as of now.
Okay. In your statement, Dr. Subramanyam, there's a particular portion which I thought perhaps you could elaborate on. You say that, the Indian Psychiatric Society is cognizant that a child adopted into this sort of same sex or same gendered family may face challenges or stigma and discrimination along the way. And then you say it's imperative that once legalized, such parents of the LGBTQA spectrum bring up children in a gender neutral and unbiased environment. I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
Yeah. So again, coming back to the Scandinavian studies, they actually have Sweden has some gender neutral schools. It's actually lovely to see their education system. What we mean by gender neutral, and many people confuse this when you say gender neutrality to mean that they grow up without a gender. No, no, no. That's not what we mean. What we mean is growing up without gender stereotypes. So if I am phenotypically female, but I like playing with cars and engines and I like to wear only t-shirts and jeans, I can do that. And if I belong to a heterosexual family or I belong to a family which is the same gendered parents, both of them have to give me that freedom from gender stereotypes. Now, what happens in when you're in a same gendered family, there may be talk about, the whole spectrum and rights and stuff like that. This all has to be age appropriate. We are we have to let the child understand their own gender, their own orientation, and be accepting of it at the right age when that is required to be understood. Most of the time, children, when they hit puberty, is when they realize the comfort level, how they are with their own bodies, with their own gender. And this is the time when we actually see the orientation and identity issues coming out, not before that. But gender neutrality and an unbiased environment is freedom from gender stereotypes, whereby we actually allow the child to grow in the best possible way that they want. And coming back to that study, which was a very beautiful study I told you in a Swedish school, where they actually had children of gender neutral schooling vis-a-vis the regular schooling, and they found that these children had freedom from gender stereotypes, as in the boys and the girls mingled and they did whatever. And when they were asked to identify the opposite person's gender, giving them pictures and so on, the gender neutral children were more accurately able to identify genders and gender roles as compared to those who were not, which was absolutely fascinating. As a scientist, I find that amazing, that it totally defies what we have always thought, right? You think that when you're saying gender neutral, unbiased, you're actually feeding into the child that you may be on the spectrum, and not at all. So, what we mean by gender neutrality is freedom from gender stereotypes and bringing up that child in that way, which is what we want every parent to be cognizant of, but definitely those who are same gendered families or couples to be vigilant about.
Okay. Dr. Subramanyam, what is I know again you said that the studies that we have are limited in number in terms of their sample sizes, but the impact on the mental health of LGBTQ individuals, on this sort of denial of equal rights when it comes to a host of issues which you have referred to in your statement as well. This dignity of marrying your partner if you want to, and that in a sense, being recognized by society as, since marriage as an institution is still sort of strong, in particularly in our country. What sort of impact does it have on the mental health of individuals, this continuing denial of equal rights?
So again, like I said, that we don't have head-on. We should ideally have studies studying heterosexuality versus homosexuality or the LGBTQ spectrum. But what is estimated is that anywhere between 2 to 4 times more is the psychiatric morbidity. So, if I say that today the prevalence of depression is 20%, I'm talking about somewhere close to 40 to 80%, which is it's huge. It's huge. Suicides, particularly in the youth on the LGBTQ spectrum, is almost double. It has come down a little bit now, but that's the magnitude that we're talking about. And it has such a profound impact on their mental health, because you are you're sort of being continuously ostracized for something that is not your fault, and thereby with themselves, individual, with their partners, with their families, with the society, you're always on a vigil, because you're constantly worried that something or someone somewhere is going to say something to you. How can that be a life that you lead which is stress free, right? And of course, stress is not equal to depression. Please don't get me wrong in that. That's a totally different paradigm. But the rates of depression, anxiety are very high in these individuals, partly because of the social impact, which has its impact on the epigenetics and genetics in the long term.
I want to
Very.
close by Right. I want to close by talking about the mental health support systems and the role they may have played in how members of this community have been treated over time. I want to refer to an interview I did with Vidya Dinakaran in 2021. She's a clinical psychologist who had counseled the Madras High Court judge, Justice N.A. Venkatesh, and also the parents of gay petitioners in the course of the hearing of a case on police harassment of gay couples. Vidya Dinakaran, Dr. Subramanyam, works closely with members of the LGBTQ community. In that interview, she told me that the adverse role played by mental health support systems, which includes a section of psychiatrists in India, in pathologizing homosexuality, cannot be discounted. In your understanding, Dr. Subramanyam, are there still practicing psychiatrists who claim that homosexuality is indeed a disease and recommend aversion or conversion therapies? I want to draw your attention to 2022 case of Dr. Deepak Kelkar, who on his sort of rather popular YouTube channel had made this claim again that homosexuality is actually a disease, etc. I know that the Indian Psychiatric Society had initiated an inquiry. Could you tell us what you found, and is there something like running foul of existing guidelines or ethics? Uh, what can you tell us about it?
Uh, in terms of guidelines and ethics per se, we have a general format which includes a part of the LGBTQ in it. But what we do as a society, which we are very committed to, is constantly having CMEs and seminars to update knowledge. What I think you are talking about, and there's probably a handful of people who are not aware. They are not aware of how much change in science and understanding of the spectrum has evolved since the time that they had become psychiatrists or mental health professionals, which includes the rest, not only non psychiatrists too. So, conversion therapies are something which the populace at large does ask us for, even till today. There are people who come from all sorts of social backgrounds and they come and say that, my so and so is on this spectrum and this is what they are saying, so is it possible for you to have an impact and influence them? It takes us a lot of counseling to change that mindset, right? So similarly, the people who are slightly from the older training systems to get back into the newer training systems, and what we did with what was done, of course I don't know the details of the case with Dr. Kilkar, but definitely he was advised and seen to it that there was a lot of education and training done with him to understand the nuances of what LGBTQ stands for, what are the mental health perspectives of LGBTQ, and this kind of training is disseminated throughout the country. So, like we have zonal branches, and then we have regional branches, we have local branches, and some things the IPS decides that these are the minimum things which you must have as training all throughout. So, all our members are on board as far as this is concerned.
All
But
right.
I must tell you, there's a lot of pressure from the society to kind of, you know, bring around that change. So, yeah, so we are slowly working towards that also, and possibly we'll do something in the near future regarding how to tackle that at the society level.
All right. For the moment, Dr. Alka Subramanyam, thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your insight into the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. Thank you.